Are you ready, Senator Hunt? Okay, let's go.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Frederickson and members of the Health and Human Services Committee. I'm Senator Megan Hunt, MEGANHUNT, and I represent District 8 in the northern part of Midtown Omaha. And I am here today to present LB734, a bill that would attempt to undo some new federal work requirements for SNAP for 3 specific groups of Nebraskans who were not previously subject to these requirements. All of these requirements came with the passage of H.R. 1, the one big beautiful bill in Congress. And the groups of people that bill affected in Nebraska are veterans, the homeless, and young people who are aging out of foster care under age 24. So the short version of this bill, if you want to zone out or can't help it, the short version is that this bill puts back what was undone by H.R. 1. So H.R. 1 imposed a number of changes to states' implementation of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And one of these changes was to impose new work requirements on these 3 aforementioned groups that have historically been exempt from such work requirements. As a result, these groups have lost access to crucial food assistance that they depend on while they are unable to work due to health conditions, PTSD, or other physical or mental disabilities, or during a transitory period while building a more stable future in the case of people experiencing homelessness, or youth aging out of or having recently aged out of foster care. LB 734 would remove a new federally imposed barrier to the temporary safety net that SNAP provides for these individuals, restoring Nebraska back to its previous status quo on that policy. This is accomplished by directing the Department of Health and Human Services to apply for a federal waiver from these H.R. 1 requirements. The federal updates to SNAP were not adopted in consultation with the states, and now it is our prerogative as state lawmakers to weigh in on how Nebraska is going to choose to implement those changes. In the vast majority of cases, studies show that stricter work requirements do not accomplish their stated goal of limiting the people using food assistance, because most SNAP recipients who are able to work and are required to work already do work or participate in an employment training program. There are pre-existing general work requirements for people aged 16 to 59 and able to work, and additional stricter work requirements and time limits for able-bodied 18 to 54-year-olds without dependents. These able-bodied adults without dependent requirements already significantly increase administrative burden for the state and families, and people risk losing benefits even if they are working for reasons like not documenting enough hours at a job. With LB 734, we are attempting to keep Nebraska where we were already at in terms of with regard to new requirements imposed by H.R. 1 on 3 specific groups, each of whom weren't subject to these requirements before this bill, and who have evidence-backed reasons for needing a little bit more latitude as far as their eligibility for food assistance. The first group, veterans in Nebraska, we know tend to face higher rates of unemployment and also have higher rates of mental illness, brain injuries, cognitive impairments, and mental health conditions like PTSD, along with other physical disabilities. And these disabilities and conditions are often related to their service to our country, and those things can prevent them from finding work. According to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, approximately 4,000 veterans in Nebraska rely on SNAP. With H.R. 1, these service-impacted veterans are now required to work or participate in training for 80 hours a week with diligent documentation in order to maintain SNAP eligibility. It's above and beyond what Nebraska was already requiring, and it's a moral failing for us to allow those who secured our freedom to struggle with food security in a system that they fought to defend. And this bill is a direct way to honor their service with action and not just with rhetoric. The second group of people who are impacted by this bill are the homeless, and these are people who are often unhoused due to mental health conditions or addiction, and those things can be very hard to treat or overcome when you don't have a stable living condition or health care. Our shelters and soup kitchens that we have in Nebraska are really good resources, but the need for these services is often much larger than the capacity that they have to provide. If you've ever talked to someone who's been in this situation, many homeless people also have reservations about staying in shelters because of legitimate concerns that they have about theft, safety conditions, assault, and some service providers, some of these shelters even have requirements for people that they have to pass a drug test to get services. So that's a significant challenge if someone is deep into addiction or doesn't have access to treatment resources. The third and final group addressed in LB734 is former foster youth who are aging out of foster care and under the age of 24. Some people age out when they reach the legal age of majority in Nebraska, which is 19. And we also have in Nebraska the Bridge to Independence program, which some foster youth voluntarily participate in. And that program provides support for people aging out of foster care up to age 21 as they transition into independent living as a young adult. There's, of course, all kinds of research out there. This is the committee that hears all of it, so you know what I'm talking about. But research about how these former or transitioning foster youth experience poverty at a much higher rate than their peers because they didn't grow up with a stable financial foundation. They are less likely to have supportive adults, mentors in their lives who set them up early for success. They may or may not have a lot of successful access to the job market. And many of them lack the professional networks that the rest of us were born into. Many of them have experienced abuse or neglect that contributes to the mental and behavioral health challenges that they have as adults. They're less likely to have reliable transportation or housing. And a lot of disruptive life events that they may have had, like home placement and school transitions, can cause them to fall behind academically, which leads to decreased earning potential in the job market. For this population of former foster youth, they're just beginning to navigate life on their own. They've had the deck stacked against them one way or the other their whole life through no fault of their own, and the least we can do is remove a completely new barrier to meeting one of their most basic needs, food. They deserve food. LB 734 has no fiscal impact as it just retains our state's current work requirement exemptions. The fiscal note states that Nebraska currently qualifies for 100% SNAP benefits to be federally funded due to our state's low error rate, and there would be no state cost if the waiver is approved, and minimal administrative costs could be absorbed with current agency resources. Retaining SNAP eligibility for these populations at no cost to the state also acts as an economic buffer for other entities. When SNAP recipients lose their benefits, the costs don't disappear. They shift to emergency rooms, local governments, shelters, and food banks that are already incredibly strained. SNAP is a more efficient use of resources. According to Nebraska's Food Bank of the Heartland, for every one meal that a food bank in Nebraska can distribute, SNAP can distribute 9. Ensuring access to 100% federally funded SNAP benefits allows those dollars to be spent supporting local grocery stores and food producers instead of shifting that cost onto other service providers in our state. This is a no-brainer at a time when so many Nebraskans are facing food insecurity. Especially for these three groups, they're facing greater food insecurity because now they have more barriers put on them because of this new bill. From 2023 to 2025, food insecurity in our state has increased 45%, and it shows no sign of slowing down. 1 in 5 food insecure Nebraskans are children who would needlessly suffer hunger if their parents lose SNAP. I believe some testifiers are coming who will provide some greater detail about the implications of the HR1 work requirements for these populations. I just want to emphasize again that prior to HR1, prior to this legislation from Congress, these groups were not subject to these work requirements. And with LB 734, we can just keep things as they were here in Nebraska. We know that our system works, we know that our agencies are equipped to do it, and we know that no one can thrive or move to greater self-sufficiency if they are hungry. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Other questions from the committee? Senator Hansen.
I think the part that you're adding is pretty self-explanatory, kind of what you were just talking about in your opening. My question is more about what you're crossing off here. Would this restrict the state's ability to enforce any work requirements then? I understand, I think it's the second paragraph that you crossed off, gets rid of the employment and training program.
Let me check with my staff and get back to you on my close with that.
Yeah.
And I also think someone behind me can answer that
Okay,
too.
cool,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Other questions? Senator Repeat.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for being here, Senator. I'm looking at the fiscal note, and in here, and I quote, it says, currently SNAP benefits are paid using 100% federal funds, and administrative costs are paid with 50% state general funds and 50% federal funds. Effective October 1, 2026, administrative costs will be paid using 75% state general funds and 25% federal funds. And I picked up in your comments, you said there would be no state cost. Is this a contradiction, or am I just not understanding?
I think we're just not understanding, and someone behind me will explain that. There's no state cost.
Okay. Okay, I'll follow up on it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, will you be here to close?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, colleagues. To put it clearly and plainly, what this bill does is, in terms of veterans, homeless people, and foster youth, it just puts things back as it was. It puts things back the same way it was before, what was it, HR 1 was passed. This bill received supportive comments from several entities that I want to lift up: the Foster Care Review Board, the Center for Rural Affairs, the Public Health Association of Nebraska, the Food Bank of the Heartland, Food Bank of Lincoln, the League of Women Voters of Nebraska, and Stand for Schools. So I want to also acknowledge the circumstances that this bill got scheduled pretty late in the session, and we've already passed the priority deadline, but if this had been before that, this is a bill that I would have been likely to prioritize. Senator Hardin, I don't know if this bill is a non-starter for you, but if there's any way that this committee would see fit to put it in a package or vote it out and give it a chance on the floor, I think that that's a discussion worth having for the people impacted, especially given the zero fiscal note. Senator Repeat, I wanted to address that question that you had. So the fiscal note says that administrative costs would be paid using 75% state general funds and 25% federal funds. That's relating to administrative cost. And in the fiscal note, it says that the fiscal cost of the administrative costs can be absorbed with current agency resources. Basically, it's what they were already doing before, and so it wouldn't require any changes for the agency to make, and it's things that they already completely understand how to do. I think that it's the new legislation of HB1 that's causing a lot of questions for the people impacted, but also for the agency and also for the employees and workers and staff that have to implement new regulations now. So I'm saying let's put it back before like it was. Happy to answer any other questions.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes LB 734.